Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of What Israel Is. And there's quite a lot to go over. Um, I wanted to maybe discuss the latest Security Council resolution with regards to Israel and specifically the occupied territories. However, I feel that first I would have needed to go over the entire bulk, this huge topic that is the occupation and the occupied territories and the history of that. So I will do that. And I think it's been a long time coming. Um, but I do want to touch upon one thing with regards to the UN. The exiting UN Secretary General, Ban Ki moon, has actually admitted the following: the UN has a disproportionate volume of resolutions against Israel, which serves to foil its ability to fulfill its role effectively. And also, he has said this: we cannot have a bias against Israel at the UN. So, this is a bit of vindication for Israelis who, as I've said, they are well aware of that and have been well aware of this fact for a long, long time. So just waving at Israelis and at Israel at large the number of resolutions that have been passed at the UN as if it's some proof of anything does not work anymore. Um, in the last couple of days, a long saga which has haunted and will continue to haunt the Israeli society at large has come to, I want to say, an end, but knowing how the judicial process works, I am very doubtful that this will actually be an end. There will be appeals, etc., etc. But let's call it a temporary end at the very least. Um, so earlier, a lot earlier in the podcast, I went over uh, a bit of what I'm going to talk about, and this is the extrajudicial execution of a terrorist at Hebron, and there was the entire fallout that came out of that. I'll go back and talk a bit about um, what exactly happened there. So, 10 months ago, um, a two Palestinians in the city of Hebron, which is in the West Bank, um, attacked a couple of soldiers armed while they were armed with knives. Um, one soldier was wounded, and both Palestinians were shot. One died on the spot, and the other was dying. Um, when all of this unfolded, there was no commanding officer on site. Um, there were soldiers and there were Jewish settlers who were um, congregating around the site, heckling and shouting all sorts of stuff. In fact, as far as I understand what happened there, even the medics who were on site were actually from the Jewish community of Kiryat Arba, which is the Jewish settlement in Hebron. Um, about 11 minutes after the fact, after the stabbing took place, a medic or a medic from the unit, the combative unit from which the stabbed soldier was, came to the spot. Well, the corpse and the dying attacker were both still there, and he actually said to other soldiers there that there is no way that that piece of shit gets to stab his friend and leave that place alive. And what happened was that he just shot the dying Palestinian in the head from a couple of paces away. Now, a lot has been said about this. The defense claims, for example, that El Or, which is the name of that medic, that soldier, they claim that because the Palestinian was wearing a fleece jacket, that he might have been carrying an explosive charge on his person, and actually, if I'm not mistaken, the recording of what took place, you can actually hear one of these settlers around yelling something along the lines of he might have explosives on him. But looking at the coolness with which Elor committed what he had done, and also listening to what he said about how that scum had to die, and also following, this kid had some ties to several extremist organizations in Israel. Several racist semi-organizations or whatever, hate groups. And actually, almost immediately after he shot and killed the second assailant, who was again at the time lying on the ground dying. He actually shook the hand of a person by the name of Baruch Marzel. Baruch Marzel is an extremist, possibly the leader of the most extreme fringe in Israeli society. Rather, Baruch Marzel came to shake his hand, and so what happened there afterwards? What came out of it is nothing short of a schism in Israeli society. There are a lot, if not all, but a lot, maybe the majority of right-wingers in Israel have shown incredible support for this soldier. A lot of them because they actually believe the narrative that the defense was trying to push, that actually Elor was afraid for his life and the lives of other soldiers around him, and that he actually believed that this dying Palestinian was capable of a one last ditch effort and killing people. A lot of them actually believe that, but a lot of them also believe another thing, which is, if you are operating under an anti-Israel ideology, and you are going with the intent of killing Israelis, then you are forfeiting your life. And that anyone doing so does not deserve due justice. Or rather, the justice he deserves is an immediate death. And that we should not be taking prisoners. And many of them have, they elaborate on that point. If we take prisoners, then we will only be essentially, what will happen is that they will receive allowance from the state of Israel. They will receive probably free education in the prison, and they will also receive benefits from the Palestinian Authority, and at some point they may actually be released, either because, or that maybe they've been tried and the sentence has run its course, or maybe they will be released in some kind of a deal, and then they'll just get back to trying to kill Israelis. That's the point here. So if you're an enemy of Israel and you're planning to kill Israelis, you do not deserve to die. You're forfeiting your life. That's what they're what they think. Now, the problem with this, that they're assuming a war, and what's going on isn't precisely a war, could not be accurately depicted as a war. The Palestinians, I would say, are enemies of Israel. There should be no question about this. However, they are neither a recognized state. They do not have what would amount to an actual army. The people partaking in active war against Israel, or rather active conflict against Israel, do not have an army. At least in the West Bank. In Gaza it's a bit different, where you have Hamas, which you could say that they're a paramilitary organization, would amount to an army. And so individual terrorism, certainly you could not describe it as an army versus an army. And Palestinians are essentially under Israeli control, either direct or indirect, depends on where exactly they live in the territories. But even if they live in areas that are fully or supposedly fully under Palestinian Authority control, they still, you know, they still depend on Israel for a lot of things. For example, water and electricity, etc. Um, so, describing the conflict as a war and then talking about how morality is different when talking about war, it's not an apt um, description of the situation. This is not a war. It's certainly an armed conflict, but this is not a war. And it is, as much as, you know, it's uncomfortable for an Israeli to admit, it's a skewed situation, and it's skewed in our benefit. Um, but then there's a thing where, you know, a lot of Israelis also say, a lot of people on the right in Israeli politics say, who are you people to moralize us? So this guy shot a downed opponent, an assailant that was already neutralized. So what? You guys do a lot worse. With reference to, for example, the American military or any Western military. And never mind the Russian military or Arab militaries or whatever. That the fact is, well, they're not entirely wrong. And it's beginning to maybe be a bit of a strain to always say, well, we should be better. We should lead by example and strive to be better. But all the while, you're talking about us as if we're the absolute worst, when this is simply not the case. I don't know what to make of this. I think what Elora Zariel did was certainly wrong, and I have no problem denouncing what was done. But I also have to ask myself whether or not this is a part of a reality of armed conflicts. And that maybe the problem to begin with here is not the individual acts of certain soldiers, but rather the very reality of the occupation itself. And the daily types of moral failings and that are created by this ongoing situation. But in the meantime, what we have in Israel is a completely polarized and fractured society where some people are trying to fight for this shred of morality while dealing with the enemy, and then there are people who simply don't, for them the enemy is the enemy, and there's he doesn't deserve anything, but you know, the very least, and that we should always prefer ours to theirs, and etc., etc. And I'm not sure that this chasm can be bridged anymore. And I'm trying to be optimistic as a person about the future, but I'm starting to lose hope, honestly. And with that, I'm bidding you all as good a weekend as you can possibly make it, and see you guys next week.